Hey, everybody, and welcome to Key Conversations for Leaders. I'm your host, John Ryan, and today we have a very special guest, Joseph Young. Joseph is a software solutions architect, founder and CEO of Kuvio Creative, a software design, branding, and marketing company, and they are a location independent agency serving clients throughout the world. Welcome to the show, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Joseph, I want to know if you wouldn't mind starting with, just telling us a little bit about your story and how did you get started with Kuvio Creative? How did that all come about?
Oh gosh, I mean, I could start all the way back to my childhood, as probably can most people. So as a child, I was a self-taught piano player. That was kind of my entire childhood was built around music. And one thing that I've kind of noticed over the years as I've done reflection about my life is that I feel like the big pattern that I picked up there with music and with teaching myself how to play piano was that I was always just very fascinated in patterns, in things that were beautiful, and like, oh, this particular sequence of events, that sounded really good. I must have hit up on something. And that just took me all the way through childhood because I was constantly fascinated, and that became my passion and my motivation for continuing with music. Then sort of my life took a turn and I became rebellious the last year of my high school and kind of lost all my scholarships and my kind of typical path. And for whatever reason, ended up joining the military, joining the Air Force because I was interested in aviation and I wanted to do air traffic control. Um, Unbeknownst to me, or maybe beknownst to me kind of unconsciously, air traffic control, the entire career is about patterns, right? It's about you've got 30 planes flying in. How do you put them together in a particular way so that everybody is safe and that it flows well and things like that? And so I really, really enjoyed it. But that was also sort of my first foray into what does the adult life look like? And in the military taught me sort of this is all that I knew, right? So it taught me, well, it looks like the adult life is just pure bureaucracy and a bunch of politics and people in charge that probably shouldn't be in charge because they've been there longer. And this weird sort of, fixed hierarchy of power that, like, unless powerful people yourself or you do good on tests, you're never going to be able to leverage your own talents in a way that will get you anywhere unless you spend 30 years there to try to get there, right? And so that kind of started, you know guiding my thoughts on things. But the last half of my military career I spent completely overseas. I went to South Korea and then spent 4 years in Italy, and did 6 months in Iraq as well. And every one of those places was at a Korean or Italian or Iraqi base. So we were working side by side with coworkers that were, either military or civilian of that. And this was sort of my first foray into, oh my gosh, now I have coworkers that are not in charge of me, that don't have the same sort of power structure, but we're working together. And in some cases I'm in charge, in some cases, they're in charge. How do we how do I interact in this situation? If I'm in a leadership position, now that I have the ability to do something, what do I do about it? And what was so interesting about it is that the best possible thing that always worked was also somehow the simplest. All I had to do was step back and let them give them the space to find their own path, right? And whatever it was that I had the power in that particular situation to do, all I could do was give them the space to do that, right? Which is basically the opposite of what most sort of managerial positions are, which is like dictate until you finally, get your working day to a point that is productive, right? According to the managerial dictates. But in this case, it was like, that's not leading anywhere because it's just putting all of the onus of what the definition of productivity is on the very people who have stopped doing that job or who have never done that job in the first place, instead of putting it on, instead of just giving people the space to find their own path and to find their own talents and to really like hone themselves and figure out what they're passionate about and what they do best. And so I ended up with this sort of topsy turvy relationship with particularly the Italians, which, because I was there for 4 years, that was completely different than most of my coworkers, because most of them were sort of still in the mindset of, we're Americans, we're going to come in and inject our culture, and we're going to inject our things, and it's our way, and we're going to institute this kind of power structure. And so at the same time that I was getting a lot of flack from the American side for like not doing, the typical sort of power structure way, I was getting awards and things from the Italians who were saying, why can't more Americans act like this? Like finally we figured out we feel like we are able to work successfully in our own country, in our own base, without this kind of American oversight. And so that taught me a lot. Then, the next kind of phase was, I was done with the military, I was done with air traffic, and I wanted to switch careers. And so I switched into software, which I had kind of dabbled with in my childhood. Same thing, right? So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to leave this power structure. There's never going to be politics again. All I have to do is just do my job well, and immediately I'll be in charge of a whole bunch of things, right? So obviously that's not the way it works, right? So, but it's a dialed down level of the military. And so I spent a few years at a couple of jobs just being a normal software developer, and saw the same freaking patterns again, right? Which is, you've got a bunch of people in charge. Those people are dictating, mission and values and all of these kind of arbitrary things. You've got a bunch of people that are doing the actual work, which is the majority of the company. And those people are just lost. Everybody is lost because they're in this weird space where they're waiting for middle management to tell them what to do, but also middle management has no idea how to tell them what to do. And so they're just kind of stuck, right? And they get used to that. And I was in the same place. I got used to this notion of, well, if I can't find my own path, if I'm going to have to learn, this weird world of politics to find my own path, then I guess all that I have to do is, to just wait for middle management. And I guess the company is somehow surviving with a bunch of people who just have no real, direction. And finally, long story short, I got frustrated with it enough that I realized that the only real way that I was going to be able to run the experiments that I wanted to run in a company was to break free from that and try to start my own thing. And so that's what I did. And from the beginning, we've just tried to do everything kind of topsy-turvy from the traditional way. We've been 100% remote from the very beginning, and that's as of 5 years ago. We put in a 30-hour work week from the very beginning. All of these things that I was always constantly frustrated with my industry going, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week is common because they're trying to squeeze as much out of you as possible. And so we just tried to do the opposite, because I had this inkling that there was a combination of patterns that was completely opposite from what most people were doing, that put together would actually work better than what most people were doing.